This is Barry. Barry owns property, quite a lot of it. Barry does not remember exactly how much. Barry's spreadsheet remembers. Barry and the spreadsheet have an arrangement that works very well for both of them. Barry's neighbor asked Barry once how he affords it all. Barry smiled and said patience and structure. His neighbor nodded slowly in the way people nod when they have understood nothing but do not want to ask again. They have not spoken about it since. They waved, though. Very cordial wave. Today, Barry wants to talk about the second one, not the first. Everyone already knows about the first property. The first property is terrifying and expensive, and you lie awake for the first few months at 3 a.m. convinced you've made a catastrophic mistake. You haven't, but you don't know that yet, so you just lie there, staring at the ceiling, doing mental arithmetic that makes everything worse. Barry remembers this feeling very clearly. Barry has largely recovered. Today, Barry wants to talk about what happens after. You saved for years, genuinely years. You watch the number in your savings account move upward with all the pace and drama of watching paint dry on a very cold day in a poorly ventilated room. Barry has done this. Barry does not recommend either experience. You got the mortgage. You signed the document. The number was so large your hand actually trembled a little, which you didn't mention to anyone because you were trying to seem like a person who has their life together. Every month, the payment goes out and you feel it. The margin is thin, one unexpected cost, and you're shuffling things around. The boiler breaks at 7 p.m. on a Friday in February, and suddenly you are a person who rings plumbers in a slightly higher-pitched voice than usual, making promises about reviews and payment speed that you absolutely intend to keep. And the way you live reflects all of this, in ways so small and constant that you stop noticing them. You go to a restaurant, and you open the menu from the right side first, not the left, where the food is, the right where the prices are. You scan the prices, do a quick calculation, identify the safe zone, and then you look at the food within the safe zone and pick something from it and tell yourself you wanted that anyway. You book holidays based on when the flights are cheapest rather than when you actually want to go. You need new trainers and you wait for a sale, not because you are a bad or foolish person, because the margin is thin. And thin margins make careful people, and careful people check the right side of the menu first. And this is just the texture of life when one large mortgage is the defining financial fact of your existence. Barry remembers all of this. Barry remembers it with great clarity and absolutely no desire to go back. But here's what's happening underneath all of that. Without you doing anything in particular to cause it, the mortgage is being paid down. Slowly and consistently, the property is, in most markets over most periods of time, quietly going up in value. You are building something called equity, which sounds like a very boring word, and it is a very boring word, but it is secretly one of the most useful things in the world. One day you look at what you owe versus what the place is worth, and you go, oh, I have money. It's all sitting in the walls of a building, and I can't exactly spend it on lunch, but it's there, and it's real. This is where the second property begins. Most people see the equity, feel a warm, fuzzy feeling about it, consider themselves very sensible and forward-thinking, and then do absolutely nothing with it. Completely reasonable. Barry does not judge this at all. Barry simply notes that it is not what Barry did. What Barry did was go back to the bank. Barry said, "This property I own is now worth considerably more than I paid for it. I would like to borrow against that increased value, please." The bank said, "Of course, here is some of that equity in the form of cash. Would you like a pen?" Barry took the cash. Barry used it as a deposit on the second property. Barry did not wait years. Barry did not save anything. Barry used the equity in the first house to buy the second house. The first house paid for the second house. This felt, to Barry, extremely elegant. Barry is a man who appreciates elegance. This is called remortgaging or equity release. It is a completely normal financial product. It is not a trick. It is not a loophole. It is not something only available to the mysteriously wealthy. The reason most people don't do it is simply that nobody has ever sat them down and explained that it's an option. Barry had someone explain it. Barry paid for the explanation. Barry considers this the best money he spent that year, and Barry once bought a boat. The boat was fine, the explanation was better. Now, Barry has two properties, and this is where something shifts. Not just in the numbers, in everything. The bank, for a start, treats you completely different. With one property, you are a homeowner, respectable, a borrower, but essentially one data point sitting across from someone who would rather be at lunch. With 2 properties, you are a portfolio landlord, which is a phrase that unlocks a different team, sometimes a different rate, and in Barry's experience, noticeably better biscuits in the meeting. Not the biscuits you got with 1 property. Those were digestives, barely room temperature, on a napkin. These are proper biscuits, thick one, on a plate, with a little paper doily underneath. Barry does not know exactly what changed. Barry accepts the biscuits without question and considers them one of the finer perks of property ownership. The accountant also looks at you differently. 1 rental property is an accident. Oh, I just kept my old flat when I moved in with someone it seemed wasteful to sell? Fine. Mild. A single line on a personal tax return. 2 properties is intent. You are building something. Barry's accountant sat Barry down after the second property and said, very quietly, Barry's accountant says all important things very quietly. It is one of his qualities. That it might be time to think about a limited company structure. Barry listened carefully because Barry always listens when his accountant gets quiet. Barry set up the company. Barry has not regretted it for a single moment. Barry and his accountant have been meeting quarterly for 11 years. It is by some measures the most stable and mutually satisfying relationship in Barry's life. Barry's wife is aware of this ranking. Barry's wife has opinions about it. Barry's accountant sends her a biscuit at Christmas. She accepts it. Nobody discusses this. The company changes the tax situation considerably. The mortgage interest that individual landlords can no longer deduct from their rental income, limited companies can still deduct as a business expense. The rental income flows through the company. Profits get taxed at corporation tax rates, which are meaningfully lower than the top rate of income tax. Barry pays himself dividends, taxed at a lower rate again. The whole thing sits there, running quietly in the background like a very efficient, very boring machine that occasionally produces money. Barry's accountant is extremely pleased with the arrangement. Barry takes his accountant to dinner once a year to celebrate. Barry lets his accountant pick the restaurant. His accountant always picks the same restaurant. It is not a cheap restaurant. Barry has never once complained about this because the alternative is doing his own taxes, and Barry would genuinely rather be deceased. Now, here is the part that really matters. Because the tax structures are clever and the equity mechanics are satisfying, but the thing Barry actually wants to talk about is what happens next. What the second property makes possible that the first one never could. And the answer is not, despite what you might expect, that Barry immediately went and spent the money on himself. The answer is considerably more interesting than that. The answer is that Barry went and bought a third property, because here is what most people miss when they think about the second property. The second property is not the destination. The second property is proof that the mechanism works, and once you know the mechanism works, the only sensible thing to do is run it again. The equity builds on the second property just as it built on the first. The tenants are paying down the mortgage every month without being asked, which Barry finds enormously charming of them. The property is appreciating, and one day, faster than you'd expect because you are now doing this across 2 properties simultaneously, you look at the numbers, and the same opportunity is sitting right there waiting for you. More equity, more borrowing capacity, another deposit, another property. Barry went back to the bank. The bank, who now knew Barry quite well, who had Barry's file, who laid out biscuits specifically because they knew Barry was coming, said, of course, here is more capital. And Barry bought the third one. The third one had tenants within 6 weeks. The tenants paid the mortgage got paid down, the equity built, and then Barry did it again. And again after that, each property accelerating the timeline of the next one because the equity is now building across a larger base, because the rental income is compounding across multiple assets, because the limited company structure is already in place, and adding another property to it is considerably simpler than setting the whole thing up was in the first place. This is the part nobody properly explains. They talk about getting your first property, getting on the ladder, 1 rung at a time. What they do not tell you is that after the second property, the third becomes significantly more achievable, the fourth more achievable still. And by the time you are looking at the fifth, you are having a completely different conversation with a completely different version of your bank who has reserved a specific type of biscuit just for you. Barry is not going to tell you what biscuit. Barry does not want to oversell it. It is a very good biscuit. The compounding effect of this is difficult to overstate. It is not just that the wealth grows, it is that the speed at which it grows accelerates. One property appreciating is nice. Two properties appreciating simultaneously is nicer. Five properties appreciating, all with mortgages being paid down by tenants, all sitting inside a tax-efficient company structure, all generating equity that can be recycled into the next acquisition, is the kind of thing that makes Barry open his spreadsheet on a Sunday morning with genuine enthusiasm, which his friends find deeply strange. Barry once showed the spreadsheet to someone at a pub. Barry closed the laptop, finished his drink, and went home to look at the spreadsheet in peace. Barry has not shown it to anyone since. The spreadsheet does not ask Barry what is wrong with him. The spreadsheet simply updates. The key thing to understand is that the equity from all of these properties does not just sit there. It works. You can borrow against it, recycle it, redeploy it. The properties are not static assets parked in a field somewhere. They are a mechanism. They generate income, they build equity. The equity generates more purchasing power. The purchasing power acquires more assets. The assets generate more income. The wheel turns. Barry did not invent the wheel. Barry simply got on it at the right moment and has been enjoying the rotation ever since. And yes, the lifestyle does change. Of course it does. Barry is not going to pretend that the money vanishes entirely into further acquisitions, and Barry lives like a monk. Barry stopped checking the right side of the menu quite some time ago. Barry books the hotel he actually wants. Barry's wine got noticeably better. Barry started buying bottles with names his friends couldn't pronounce and serving them at dinners without warning. His friends drank it with the expressions of people who do not like what they are drinking, but cannot say so because it was clearly expensive. Barry found this one of the more enjoyable parts of the whole journey. These things are true, and Barry is not ashamed of them, but they are not the point. The point is the mechanism. The point is the wheel. The point is that once it is turning, it does not particularly need Barry to keep pushing it, which frees Barry up to do other things, most of which involve looking at the spreadsheet and occasionally buying another property. Barry's second property was a very long time ago. Barry has since lost count of the total number. The spreadsheet has not lost count. The spreadsheet is extremely precise, and Barry finds it a source of quiet, consistent, genuine satisfaction. For legal reasons, Barry is entirely fictional. This is satire. The properties are fictional. The company is fictional. The restaurant is fictional, but the bill was very real. None of this is financial or property advice. Barry is not your accountant. Barry is not your landlord. If Barry is somehow your landlord, please contact the property manager.